All right. Episode 2.
Episode 2.
We'll see how this goes. Bad start. So I have some notes that I took. You came unprepared, as always. Kidding. I do have some notes.
It's ironic. For what this is about, that's ironic.
Nah, that's normal. So we have some stuff we want to get into, but we can start with just small talk. So how was your day?
Small talk.
It's important, you know.
Yeah, my day was. It wasn't too bad.
Yeah,
I was productive.
it's good. School wise or just life wise?
Pretty overall, like. Yeah, overall. I went to the gym in the morning.
Nice.
Came home. College stuff. Upload discussion board posts. The whole 9 yards.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Understandable though. It's fun. That's good. It's good. I was somewhat productive as well. Didn't do anything crazy, but got life in order a little bit, which is good. So, the general topic of this podcast is supposed to be friendship, specifically our friendship, and we want to talk a little bit about how we've harbored a good friendship over the course of the ventures we've had. So, whether it be trips that we went on or starting this business, previous businesses, things like that, how we've managed it, and then on top of that, how are we going to continue to manage it? What's a way that, and this is productive for both, I think it's productive for both you guys and us, because it's not often we catch ourselves having these types of conversations that are as transparent and guided as this conversation ideally is, but also being able for you guys to see how we navigate our friendship and maybe how you guys can harbor friendships similar to ours with your own friends or family or however it be. So,
yeah.
I have it kind of split up into 3 main topics, or 4 actually. And I think these are 4 topics that have grounded our relationship. Pride. That's a big part of our relationship. Love, the verb, specifically the action love, not the feeling or whatever you want to call it. Commonality and truth. So these are, I think, big things that that have harbored our friendship, and in their own unique way. Not all of them are good, not all of them are bad, but in their own unique way. So we can start with pride. This is one that's big for both of us. I think our competitive nature has given us some struggles.
Yeah.
Yeah. Quite a bit of them, to be honest. It's common. I would like to think it's common in male relationships, not just ours, but most male relationships. It's a lot of times you are competitive. It's just how you are.
Oh, yeah.
And not necessarily even in an unhealthy way, although I think sometimes we've bridged that gap pretty quickly, where it goes from like we're holding each other accountable to like we're trying to compete and to compare at the same time, which is big, because competing doesn't mean you have to compare necessarily. Well, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, and how we've navigated that through our relationship?
Yeah. No, I think most of our struggles come from not even just competition, but pride in general as the underlying tone. Yeah, just things like self-esteem or self-confidence in what we believe or what we hold to be true, even if it's not even significant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like if anything has hurt our relationship at all or like given us any trouble throughout it, it's probably pride.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like, Mere Christianity, C.S. Lewis says pride is the root of all evil. And yeah, I think we grow through it though. I feel like every time we do that, we find our way back.
Yeah.
I think that's something we do pretty well.
I would agree. I think there hasn't been a situation where our pride has actually hindered or ruined our relationship.
Yeah. It hasn't put like an ultimate toll on our relationship, but there's been times where we've had to take breaks.
Yeah.
Like been times where we'd had to, back off a little bit, take time on our own.
But I think that's another important part about having a healthy relationship is being able to like step away. And that doesn't mean that you have this like giant moment where you're like, okay, we need to take a break. Like,
Yeah.
we don't even outline that. We
No.
don't even say, like, it's time for us to take this amount of time from each other. Like, I think in a lot of romantic relationships, that happens. People are like, we need 2 weeks. And we need to say we're not boyfriend, girlfriend for these 2 weeks. And it's like, no, you just kind of understand when someone needs space and when you need your space. And I think if it's healthy, that they'll feel it as well, as long as they have some social awareness, which I think we both have.
Yeah. And in an intentional, good relationship, you'll know when to come back, and you'll know when to start hanging out a lot. Like, you'll know when to re-spark it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I feel like that's another thing that I feel like sometimes in relationships, whether it's a friendship or a romantic relationship, when people decide to implement some sort of break, it ends up being kind of one-sided.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it just gives, I mean, you take 2 months off of someone that you're, not really into anymore. You fell out of love, fell out of feeling. It's done.
For sure. I think the other thing is understanding when it's time to grow with the person and when it's time to grow without. So individuality is something that you need to have regardless of whether you're in a friendship or you're in a relationship or whatever. You need to have it always, alone or together. You need to be your own individual.
Yeah.
But there's no reason why in both a friendship and a platonic friendship and romantic friendship, or relationship, why you can't find your individuality in the relationship. So you can still figure out what you guys are both doing together, but also what you both are doing separately. And that can happen in sort of a harmonious way where sometimes you can go together and say, this is what we want to do as a group or as a couple or whatever. And then you can decide, okay, this is what I need to do as my own person. These are my convictions. This is what I need to do. And they tend to work well together. And when you decide to separate those two things, when you say, okay, when I'm with this person, it's a group conviction. And when I'm away from this person, it's an individual conviction. And they don't ever intermingle. I think you create a lot of issues. And I think that's when those breaks become permanent. That's when you step away from something and you realize that you did the entire time it was about the group conviction instead of your individual conviction, and they never acted in a harmonious way. That's when things crumble. And I think we've both had a pretty good hold on like our individual beliefs and then coming together to figure out how we're going to go into the world as a team.
Yeah.
With our beliefs.
Yeah. I mean, and that's it's tough, especially because when we start something, and there's always a foundation in things we start. Like, like for the company, we have a statement. Mm-hmm. Like we believe in something, and that is what is driving the company.
Right.
And we don't agree on everything.
Of course.
It's a
given.
Yeah, it's a given.
Right.
So to be able to find that common ground and make that the focus point, rather than just stumbling and arguing over, the semantics that we don't agree on.
Right.
I think that's something that we've been able to do, and I think that's what's given us the opportunity to have a strong friendship even throughout a quote unquote professional endeavor.
Yeah. And I think especially when you start to involve business or anything that the average male takes pride in, we'll say, it naturally becomes competitive.
Oh yeah. I'm not even ashamed. Like, I'm a competitive person.
Right. And I am too. Maybe to a lesser degree in some situations.
Yeah.
But
our type of competitive
is different.
Like, I like petty competitiveness. Like, my feelings don't get hurt when someone is trying to be competitive with me. Everything can be a competition. I don't mind. I think that a lot of that just drives me. Mm-hmm. Whereas some people aren't. Like, some people want to break from it. It's something I'm still getting used to.
Yeah, definitely.
Sure.
It can be taxing. And I think, I'll lay out like a very simple example of when an unhealthy, and I do this too. In fact, I think I do this maybe even more so than you do. But I think that we feed into each other. It becomes this sort of constant feedback loop where I feed into this and then you feed back into it. And we try to like one up each other the whole time. But like, let's say that you come to me after a long day. We see each other for the first time in person. We talk about our day, which is pretty normal. You do that with any friend. And you say, oh my gosh, I had a busy day. I did X, Y, Z, all kinds of things. And then I say, oh man, me too, but I did XYZ B plus this.
Yeah.
And we have these little moments where we try to one up each other.
Yeah.
And the reality is that doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
It's stupid.
At all. It's very stupid.
Right.
See, those are the kinds of things where I don't like the competition.
Right.
That's a situation where it's like, okay, yeah, it's unnecessary. There's no point in one-upping each other.
But the reality is, and I think most people out there can resonate with this situation, because most friendships do function, at least at one point or another, in this way, where you just feel this need to like prove something, and it's not. And
it's kind of ironic, because I think the underlying thing is we want respect. When I tell you I did this, and this, I want respect from you. Mm-hmm. I want him to think in the back of his mind, wow, Gabe did more than me this day. Dang, man. No, but in reality, you're just going to be pissed off at me because I'm flexing something that's not worth flexing.
Right.
So it's kind of ironic, because you're demanding, or you're seeking respect, and in reality, you're just pissing off your friend.
Yeah. And I think even to some degree, you want to feel, I mean, respect certainly, but you want them to understand what you're going through. And the other person immediately, instead of taking that and being like, it's almost like someone wants, at least in my opinion, when I say it, I don't necessarily want respect from you, although that's certainly is a contributing factor. I want you to be proud of me as a friend. Yeah. So, and that's so real, right? Instead of us being proud of people, let's say that you were on a team, let's just say like a sports team, a basketball team or something, and somebody shot crazy amounts of threes. They got like 60% from three. That's crazy. Instead of you being like, oh man, I could probably do like 53, and taking it competitively and trying to compare, instead you're like, dang, I know somebody who is able to shoot 60% from three. That's the mindset that we have to have. Like, instead of when you come to me and explain your day, I'm like, instead of me not even being like, oh, he did more than me today, oh dang, I respect him for it. Instead being like, I have a friend who's capable of doing that much in a day. Yeah. That's absolutely the sort of, at least in a business relationship, that's the sort of
encouragement. It has to be encouraging. And honestly, I do that. Mm-hmm. And you know this about me. We've talked about it. And one of my biggest problems is not encouraging you. Mm-hmm. I encourage about you. Oh man, I'll tell others. All my friends. Yeah. Oh yeah, all my friends. Owen, he's picked up his life. He is probably the busiest person I know. He gets more done than the store manager. He does like whatever. Yeah. Just completely like, because in reality, I am really proud of you.
Right.
Like, and how far you've come.
And vice versa.
But it's just a matter of like,
saying
I'm not good at, words of affirmation is not my love language. And it's not something I'm good at least to someone's face.
Well, and to some extent that's okay, right? Because, I heard a quote that said like, when everybody is telling you you're doing great and that you're moving forward and you feel like you're not, that's the scariest place to be. Because either A, you have a bunch of people who are surrounding you who are telling you what you want to hear, not what you need to hear. Or B, these people don't know you well enough to know where you actually are, and they're not good friends. So either way, it's scary to be in. Yeah. So I'd much rather have friends who are talking good about me behind my back, so to speak, than to me, because it keeps me going, right? It keeps me wanting their approval because they don't give it to me so easily. I mean, but in a real like psychological way, that's true. And then it helps me with other relationships that I don't even know I need help with.
That's true, because they look up to you more because I'm a friend talking great about you.
Right.
But, I mean, that doesn't mean... There's a time where I should tell you where you need to work on things.
For sure.
But there's also a time where you need to get encouragement from me.
Yeah.
Because as much as it might help you with other relationships, our relationship is still on the chopping block.
Yeah, all the time.
When I'm not being kind to you.
Right.
So... yeah, I think there's a good mix of like a true friend knows when to criticize, and a criticism doesn't always necessarily need to come every time you do something wrong.
And I would argue it needs to come like not often.
Not often.
Because it's got to be a very specific, it's got to be done in a very particular way that harbors like an actual change.
Right. But exactly. What I was saying was like a good friend needs to know when to criticize and when to encourage. Yeah. Encouraging needs to come more. And like I talked about, like we talked about this briefly in our first episode. Mm-hmm. Just one of the biggest ways that you can criticize someone,
Mhm.
and it's not supposed to be this way, but I feel like one of the biggest ways you can criticize someone or show them that they need to fix some things is by living the life that you want for them.
Yeah, for
Being
sure.
a light.
Yeah.
It's the same, being the light on the hill.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm living my life and I'm getting a lot of things done and I'm waking up on early and, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
You're going to learn from that. I'm going to learn from you when you do that.
Yep.
So.
Definitely. I mean, leading by example is always going to be the most productive because people naturally envy. So make them envy good things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that kind of leads us into the next part, which is love. Not the feeling, but the action, the verb.
Yeah.
So through the moments where we have pride, and I want people to know, by no means are we like a perfect friendship. Obviously, we just described situations where we've done some pretty imperfect things. There are times where we walk away angry, where we're just like, all right, you know what? I give up. I'm going home or whatever. We're done. Like, I just need time.
Yeah.
And the thing that continues to pull us back is our choice of loving each other. So beyond like, we can have monumental arguments, things that we're like foundational things that we realize we disagree on, which have happened. But regardless of that, we choose to continue to love each other because that's what we both feel called to do. And it makes it easier when it's reciprocal. So when you choose to do it to me, it makes it a lot easier for me to do it to you.
Oh, and you guys have heard this, but there's never a time where an apology won't stop making someone mad. I mean, you would have had to kill their mom or something. Like often, I mean, all it takes is the first step, really. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes that is how to fix a relationship.
Yeah. So when we both make that choice proactively, it makes it a lot easier for us to come back, humble ourselves. Obviously, we both have a relationship with God. So when we leave, maybe me more so than you, in the sense that I tend to ponder outside of the conversation rather than in it. I'm not a very like proactive change. It takes me like time after a conversation to go home, pray, think, and then I will realize, oh, maybe I was wrong here. Oh, maybe I was actually more right than I thought or whatever. And then ask the Lord to like humble me and then bring me to you so that I can actually apologize for whatever I did and vice versa. So we can both humble ourselves. But in that, it makes it much easier for us to like get back together the next time we hang out or whatever and be like, all right, I'm sorry. This is what I did wrong. And most of the time we both did some things wrong. And then we just say it, drop it, move on instead of letting it like build up. And that's super important. You need to have at least some level of transparency. There is such thing as too much transparency. And I want to be clear about this because if you tell your partner or your friend or whoever everything that annoys you about them, it's going to end poorly, right? The other person doesn't need to know every single problem that they have. They probably already know it, and even if they don't, nobody's perfect. Stop trying to make them perfect.
Yeah.
But the big things, and you can come up with lists. There's great exercises out there, and I'm not gonna, you can write down 10 things that you're like, these are things that genuinely make it difficult for me to hang out with this person. I'm gonna make them aware of them, and in a way that's kind. You're not gonna be like, all right, I got a list of 10 things you should fix. But over time, you can bring up like, hey, I don't particularly enjoy it when you do this. Something like that. There's good ways to do it, but coming out with a way that you can find those big things and communicate them to the person in a transparent way instead of letting them build, so that at one time, once all of it adds up, you just kind of spew it all out. And instead of spewing out the 10 things, you end up spewing out like the 50 that you didn't need to spew out. And it just ruins it all. And it makes it much harder to go back the next day and apologize and to start from scratch again or to kind of rehash everything. We've struggled with that before, obviously. We're both pretty good communicators, which has been a blessing for sure. We don't care about confrontation. Both of us are more than happy to have conversations. But remembering to be transparent, to not let something build this.
Yeah, that's really been important. Probably the most recent.
Yeah.
Amongst our friendship, like, we've let things build up. Mm-hmm. Or, I mean, at least I have. There's been, tiny little things that are tiny, but 10, 20, they start to add up.
Yep.
Once you get to 10, 20 of those tiny things, it starts to become annoying. And just nip it in the bud when it happens, when you see it. In a very respectful and open and kind way. Because otherwise it's going to just lead to other problems. Yeah.
And I think for me, I tend to address things quickly, but sometimes things that don't need to be addressed. So I don't really have a build-up. I do sometimes, but not often, because I tend to address them quickly. But there are things that I'll address, like before, where I'll come up with more than I needed to. I'll come at you for like something stupid, where it's like, that wasn't necessary. You didn't need to know that. It really wouldn't have mattered if I just let it sit for like 10 minutes.
Part of love too is, just putting up with it.
Yeah, tolerance.
There's going to be certain things, like if you're getting annoyed at how someone eats, deal with it.
Right.
Like there's just a certain, we're talking about like fundamental issues that genuinely make it difficult to hang out. We're not talking about the way you blow your nose is kind of intrusive. Like it's not like that.
And if that is like a deal breaker for you, well, that's weird. But also fine, but understand not outlandishness, but understand how nitpicky that is.
Yeah.
And figure out a way to deliver that where it's not like, damn, like somebody being like, I don't like the way this person breathes. It's like, nobody's changing the way they breathe for anybody.
Yeah.
I don't care how close you are.
Yeah.
So you either figure out how to tolerate it, or you figure out some sort of solution.
Yeah. And I think the former is how most people should deal with that, though.
Agreed.
I think that we need to humble ourselves a little bit and not need someone to eat a certain way and breathe a certain way, etc. Right. But another part of that, I will say, is those like things like, wow, the way you eat is annoying. A lot of those, just if you have some pre-existing anger with someone, things like that are going to be annoying, a lot more annoying.
But that's that buildup.
That's the buildup
that we were talking about. It's tolerance among the things that you can be tolerant of. So like and this is why it's so important, especially in your fundamental friendships, the ones that you've created as you've grown, specifically from like middle school into high school, even into college, where you don't quite understand what your core beliefs are yet. You're figuring them out. So you don't quite know what you're tolerant of and what you're not tolerant of. And it's important to establish those individually. Of course, your friends should have impact on it, and they will, no doubt. I don't think that you can get around that anyway. Their influences on you, especially the close friends. But figuring out those core beliefs so you can understand what you can be tolerant of and what are deal breakers, what you can't be tolerant of.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you were to blaspheme God, like I would have a hard time tolerating that, especially if it was continuous. I'd be like, I can't be around people like this. That's a core belief of mine. That's a fundamental thing that we disagree on. It's a situation where we may have to distance. Those are core beliefs that I've founded, and you have to figure those out for yourself. And oftentimes, writing them out, laying them out in a very structured way, can be really, really important. But that's kind of what I was talking about before, of individuality. You need to understand what you believe, not what your friend believes. Therefore, this is how I think when I'm around him. Because so many times people have faces, right? Around this friend, they're more secular. Around this friend, they pretend to be more, holy and more godly. Around this person, they pretend to be more professional. And the reality is, the goal is to make all of your friends somewhat unified and to make yourself consistent across all of them. And I think a lot of people struggle with that, the faces and the imposter syndrome that you often feel in this rat race of the world. And I think that's something we both have been able to do individually, because we've had other influences that are also helpful, that have made it easier for us to go to each other with these new ideas and to bounce them back off of each other, so that I don't feel like I'm sacrificing my beliefs to be with you, friends with you, and you don't sacrifice your beliefs to be friends with me.
Yeah.
And that's super important, because the moment you start doing that, it's a slippery slope.
Yeah.
And that
sometimes I sacrifice bringing up certain things with some of my friends.
Of course, yeah.
But never sacrifice your beliefs. And another thing is, those friends I can't have as close of a relationship with.
Naturally, right? And I think, we're called to be peacemakers of God, right? We're supposed to be the peacemakers of earth. And so when you have to understand when you ought to argue your side, when you should defend your faith, and when you're defending and when you're not, when you're attacking. Because I think oftentimes Christians will, and this is obviously a generalization, but Christians they won't attack, but they'll set up a structure of an argument so that they are attacked, so that they can claim defense, if that makes sense. Which in the end is just attacking. You're just doing it in a manipulative way. That happens all the time. And I've seen it happen with friends and family, and it's just like, you knew what you were doing. I do it. I've done it all the time. I set them up to give me an answer so that I have to defend what I believe, so that then I can attack what they believe. Yeah. But the reality is that's not going to do anything. It doesn't harbor any fruitful relationships or conversations.
Yeah. When you take a passive approach and you actually live like a child of God, you'll have all the opportunities to evangelize. So if your intention is pure, then God will grant you the platform you need to spread the gospel. But if your intention is to hit on someone else's belief, it's just going to create problems. Trust me, I know. It has in my life.
It will, undoubtedly. And I think if you truly walk through life having a defensive position where you only protest when you are attacked, it means more too. They're like, no, the guy who's quiet in a room? Just take a basic example. Once you hear him actually speak up in a way that's like real and stern, it means way more than the guy who's yapping in the corner, who also decides to speak up in a stern way. They may be equally as passionate, but because he chose to speak less, his holds more weight. It's the same principle of evangelizing. If you choose to talk about it a little less, to not shove it down people's throat as much, when you're prompted and you're passionate, you'll have a way better platform to actually show what you think and persuade.
Oh yeah, a couple words from a man like that is going to mean a lot more to the average person than someone that just goes and goes and goes.
Right.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that, to some degree, brings us into the next one, which is commonality. This is an interesting one. I believe there's a C.S. Lewis quote, I could be wrong, where it talks about the start of a good friendship is commonality. Mm-hmm. And then from that comes a bond, usually created through rough times, and that's what actually ignites the friendship into a true, real, godly friendship. But for us, the story was a little bit different. We didn't have commonality. Not a lot of it.
Okay. I'll disagree. I disagree with that.
Okay, go for it.
So I think that the very, very beginning of our friendship, we lacked commonality.
That's what I'm talking about.
But we weren't friends, really. Like, I'm going to be honest. Like, hanging out does not automatically make us friends. Like,
right, that's true.
It was very superficial.
Yeah.
Like, I would come... we were young, too. So I would come after co-op, and we'd jump on the trampoline and hit each other with swords, and that was the extent of our friendship.
Childish stuff,
But then later on, it started on commonality. 100% started on... We both had, like, some girl issues. And that's when we had longer, deeper conversations. That's when our friendship started to bloom, in my opinion.
Okay. So from that perspective, I can agree with you. I mean more in the sense of, like, secular commonality. In the sense, like, hobbies. Like, a lot of friendships start with, like, oh, you like basketball, I like basketball, let's hang out and play basketball. And then it blooms from that. We didn't have that.
I mean, talking was our hobby.
It was, but that's also, like...
But my point is, like, the reason we kept on hanging out was because of what we talked about.
Right.
But then later on, you changed. Developed into... You honestly developed into my interests a little bit, to an extent. Like you picked up running, which was like, I mean, if you knew this kid back in the day, that's like, you would have laughed. I mean, a lot of people did.
oh yeah, it happened.
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah. So you picked up running, then you decided to join the basketball team.
Right.
And then we had a lot of same interests.
Yeah.
We're playing tennis after this.
Yeah. But so I suppose I should have clarified a little bit more. Let me give an example, because this is going to illustrate what I'm trying to say the best. I remember vividly you calling me and asking me to come over and hang out.
Mm-hmm.
And you were like, we just want to hang out outside and do some activities.
Yeah,
that was my fat butt, lazy, never touched grass self was like, no, I don't. What the heck? Making sure it's still recording. Sorry. I was like, nah, I don't want to do that. I'm going to sit in my room and I want to play video games and watch YouTube and do all kinds of other crap. I don't want to go out there and play. Which we were kids. We were younger. We weren't too young. But we were younger.
So we used to hang out, and a lot of it was inside, like
gaming. Essentially, that was like the beginning. So the point of me saying this was like those kinds of sacrifices or those kinds of commonalities we didn't have.
Yeah.
So like our hobbies essentially were almost polar opposites.
Oh yeah, no, that is true. We had I was outdoor guy. My parents never gave me a console. And you were a gamer.
And I was just like I said, don't touch grass. That was like allergic. So, in the beginning of our friendship, you had to sacrifice a lot. Like quite a bit, because we would hang out outside, but the general focus of a lot of our hangouts, if you will, were video games, that sort of thing.
Yeah. But the tides turned.
They did. But that's two things. First was maturity, right? I started to learn, like, man, if I want to continue to harbor this relationship, I also should sacrifice. I can't not sacrifice. I have to give as well, right? So I started to do things that I didn't want to do, and then actually began to love the things, like running, like basketball, like those things I used to hate with a passion, and now I love doing them. I'm not particularly good at them, but they're still enjoyable to me.
Dude, I mean, I actually can not vividly, but vaguely remember, like, you calling me and being like, yo, you want to come over and play basketball with me and Eli? Eli is his brother.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? Wait, come again?
Yeah.
And I mean, so that was nothing but sacrifice, at least the first couple times.
Mm-hmm.
But you started picking it up, and now most of our interests are pretty common.
Right. But and luckily that's just like the beauty of growing into somebody. That's not always the case. Sometimes you grow away from somebody, and in some areas we've grown apart. Like, some interests have varied and things like that. Luckily, we've overall probably grown more into each other than out. But that commonality, that's a part of relationships that people don't quite grasp, which is especially, like I was saying, in these younger relationships, when you're still figuring out your core beliefs, you need to either find commonality and both mutually understand, like, hey, we both enjoy doing this. This is probably should be the focus of most of our hangouts because we both get something out of it. Or understand that both of you are willing to sacrifice roughly 50-50, which is just natural, right? Things are going to feel unfair when they're not. Roughly 50-50 on things that we don't want to do. So if you want to go do something I don't want to do, I will sacrifice, but understand that in turn you owe me, right? And this shouldn't be laid out like this. Like, as a friendship, this is just like known. You don't need to say these things.
I mean, okay,
hopefully.
My personal belief is that you both should just constantly be giving. Be able to sacrifice for the other person. And essentially, like, if I'm constantly giving to you,
mm-hmm.
and I'm constantly sacrificing myself to you, and you're not reciprocating that, it's probably not a worth it friendship.
And I think you'll naturally drift away as well.
Yeah.
I don't think it'll have to be proactive, like, all right, I'm done.
Yeah. You're just going to get tired of doing something you don't want to do every time you hang out with this person.
Right.
And eventually, but for a friendship, like, we were blessed to have, when he sacrificed, eventually the tables turned and we did something that he wanted to do, etc. And I think that, and that's helped a lot.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And I think those are some of the most undervalued things in a friendship, is those small sacrifices of doing activities that you don't find meaning in. I think that you don't quite realize how much it means to the other person. Even if it's, I mean, we had a situation where we played a video game at a friend's house or something, and we both didn't see the point in it at all.
Oh my gosh.
And we could have handled more maturely, because the entire time we were both like, this is beyond pointless, because the way that our life direction has gone is we have lost a little bit of sight in the point of video games, right? To me, I just don't understand the return on investment there. I've lost connection with that. And you've never quite had it. You've always kind of been like, I don't understand why I would spend time on this. So going to this friend's house and spending, however many hours we did sitting on a computer was difficult for the both of us. But neither of us will know and may ever know. We may not ever know how much that meant to that friend.
Yeah. That's something that I think that's something that I failed to do too. Like we needed to recognize that we were doing this for him,
mm-hmm.
and it was not in our self-interest. And I think we got caught up enough in ourselves to the point where our mentality was, I'm not gaining anything out of this. I think video games are, immature or whatever.
Yeah.
To the point where we, to an extent, we ruined it for him.
Yeah. To an extent, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, the logical side of us may have been valid and correct. Like, we may have been right. But that's not the point.
I mean, just from a practical or like a reasonable perspective, we were wrong in the sense that it was valuable to
him.
Cultivate our friendship with him.
Right. And if it's valuable there, that it's all that you need. And so,
I mean, how many things do we do like on a daily basis for friends or for your wife or for your girlfriend that aren't really necessary, are not benefiting you, but are benefiting them? Anytime you get someone a gift, it's the same thing. Right. It's just quality time rather than gifts.
And how often you get those opportunities, because they don't come very often. No. Especially as you get older, you lose those opportunities. And so when they come up, you have to strike, because you don't get a lot of them. So I think that's something that's undervalued. I think that people need to understand that sacrifices is the most important part. It doesn't matter if you are giving them something in the sense of like, mm-hmm. I'm imparting wisdom onto you, or I'm helping you in your life journey, or you're getting more fit because you're my friend. All that doesn't really matter in the grand scheme.
No.
What matters is that you both feel like there's a reciprocal sacrifice in the relationship.
And that's the love aspect. Well, I am so adamant about the word love and how it is not and should not be tied to intimacy or romantic
like a feeling.
I mean, it can be, but it is an action verb.
Yeah.
To love someone is to do something for them. It is an action.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's encouraging them, whether any of the 5 love languages, they're called love languages for a reason, and it's all a proactive thing.
Yeah. Yep. I think that the last part, and this is probably the most important part of our entire friendship, the thing that's kept us friends for the longest, because I've had friends where we've had all of the other things. We've had love, we've had commonality, we've had our struggles, we've created bonds, but we didn't have this last piece. And so that's why this piece, I think, is the most important, and it'll probably harbor the longest and most fruitful relationships you have, and that's truth. I want to read specifically a verse before we get into it, but it's Proverbs 18:24. This is the NKJV, so different translations will say different things. Actually, quite different in translations I found. But it says, "A man who has friends must himself be friendly." So if somebody has many friends, they have to be friendly, right? But there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. So that is how I would describe our friendship. It's probably is less than a friendship and more like a brotherhood, which is ideally all of your friendships, but you have to understand that not everybody, right? But there is a friend. It doesn't say there are friends. Mm-hmm. Specifically says there is a friend.
Yeah.
Because you can't have that bond with everybody. You just can't. It takes too much time, effort. Who sticks closer than a brother. So truth obviously is both our journey towards the Lord. And I guess I want to preface this a little bit with our denominations, because I think this was a big part of our friendship and how we've both formed closer to the Lord in the past few years. Specifically, I want to say the past 3 years, but in large part, our whole friendship. So you are Coptic Orthodox since birth. You've always been a Coptic Orthodox. Of course, you've grown closer to loving it and understanding it more and being more passionate, obviously. I was Protestant at birth. I really couldn't tell you the specific, like whether it was Baptist or I couldn't tell you the specific denomination of Protestantism, but I was Protestant.
I would say like your parents are pretty Southern Baptist. Probably,
but I know we also hopped churches, and they weren't all the same type. So we were pretty like non-denominational, like pretty much the standard non-denominational family. And probably towards the past almost 10 years, we'll say 8 to 10 years, I haven't attended a church regularly for many reasons, but I haven't. So when we had started becoming friends, my foundation it existed, but it wasn't strong. And it was a Protestant non-denominational foundation, which was undoubtedly a point of contention for the both of us. You were passionate about what you believed, and I'm just passionate about being passionate. I'm just, like, if I believe it, if someone told me it, I defend it to the fullest degree, whether I actually believe it or not. That's just how I am.
Yeah, I know. I have so many instances of that. Oh, dude, because I would be arguing with some Protestant friend of mine. There was a time where we went on a little boys trip with a couple other guys, and I was arguing with these two brothers about, it was a Protestant argument. I was like, it must have been on like baptism or something. And out of nowhere, you just start arguing my position. I'm like, hold on, you're not even. And this was early before I even. Right. We had talked about it a little bit, but most of our conversations, like, you had never really indicated that you aligned with the Orthodox faith. Right. Because even our faith arguments were still in opposition. Yeah. We would argue.
I would still argue the opposite side.
Right. And then when you argued, our two friends, he was arguing my side. I looked at him like, that's right.
Well, and I think that was always a struggle of mine, was like letting my personal pride down enough to say that maybe I don't have the answer. And maybe he's younger than me. Maybe someone who is younger than me does have the answer. And maybe he has things that I don't know. And maybe I ought to learn. And that, believe me, that was a long journey. Was not easy. And took a lot of humbling from God. God had to humble me for sure. But eventually I'm at the point where now I would consider myself Orthodox more so than any other denomination. Maybe not quite to the extent he is. I'm still on my journey. And you are too, I don't think the journey ever ends.
It never ends, yeah.
But I feel more comfortable in that truth than any other truth, right? I feel more comfortable that is the truth. So with that being said, the types of conversations we'd have on baptism, on, praying for the intercessions of saints, on basically all of the points of contention that Protestants would have with the Orthodox faith or the Catholic faith, because they're similar in ways, not all, but they're similar in some ways that a lot of the points of contention can be shared. I think that is, those situations are what had us gain the most respect for each other after walking away from that, and gave us both the desire to come back to those conversations.
Oh yeah, because those conversations would end in an increase of knowledge on both ends. They would never end. It wasn't a pride thing.
Though, yeah,
we were seeking truth genuinely. That's not something I could do with any of my other friends.
Right.
That's not something that most boys are interested in.
Right.
Unfortunately. So I think that without a doubt, that gave me the most personal respect for you. Those conversations.
Yeah, and vice versa. And I think it also, because credit to the Holy Spirit, it created a craving for them, where
our conversations would gravitate towards faith and spirituality, right, and the church and dogma, and
all of it, theology, anything that we could grasp at to gain more knowledge. I think that we both craved it, and that became the center point of our friendship, which, as all friendships, it really should be. Like, I mean, when people say that God should be the center of your friendship, I think a lot of people think of it as, hi, nice to meet you. Do you believe in God?
I do, yeah.
You believe Jesus Christ?
Jesus,
cool.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. That's now the center of our friendship. Now let's throw that to the side. Forget about we ever had this conversation.
And go to a party.
And just hang out.
Yeah.
That's not what that is. That's not having God at the center of your friendship. Having God at the center of your friendship is ideally...
actively pursuing Him.
Right, and ideally... I will say the majority, something around like 70% of your conversations should lead back to some sort of faith-based conversation.
I mean, to have God as the center of your life, everything is tied to God. And a lot of people say that, and a lot of people are like, yeah, everything is tied to God, whatever. And it's like, it's really taken for granted these days. But in reality, and everything you do, God should be the background of it.
Yeah, 100%.
And everything that you do. And that's really, it's really difficult. But it's doable because I've grown so much in that regard. Like, so many things that I do every day lead back to God. Like, I'll be struggling with money or school or something of that sort. And my first thoughts are to kneel before God and pray. That's just something that, I don't know, it's hard to articulate, but it's doable and no one really sees it as such. But having God as the center of your relationship is two friends actively pursuing God in their conversations, in their actions, in the way that they live.
I think if you look at, for another example, if you were to look at the grind, the male dream grind lifestyle, you like get up at 5 a.m., go to the gym, go home, start your business, start a second business, get in the booth, record music, go on your 6-mile run, wow, this person's doing all these things. The person didn't wake up and do all of those things. Like, you can't do it. Like, you can't wake up and say, like, I'm going to run a marathon. No, you wake up and you set a goal. And then you slowly work towards that goal. What is the saying? It takes 7 days to build a habit, right? And that's, probably longer. But it's the same principle with those kinds of conversations. If you want to make God genuinely the centerpiece of your relationships, whether it be a friendship or a romantic relationship, you have to have those conversations, and you have to have them often enough to the point where they feel habitual and you come back craving them, which I believe is in no small part due to the Holy Spirit, right? Because when you talk about God and when it's fruitful, when it comes from a place of wanting to know more, you do want it again. Why not? You know what I mean? And that at least that's how I felt. I always was like, man, how can I get this conversation back to the conversation we had like the other night? How can we get right back there?
Yeah.
Because it was great. And you never want it to end, but eventually, the topic runs dry and you're both tired. Eventually conversations end. So the goal is like, how can we get it there again? How can we get to that point again? And
but that's part of, that the topic never runs dry. Ultimately, the topic never runs dry.
Yeah.
I think that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, specifically the topic of God.
Because there's, right. Yeah. There's so many things that we've come to like a solid ground on. There's so many things that we could objectively agree on now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we just keep on going. And the argument, our conversations continue. It's still always about, we always are having theological conversations and conversations about how we should live our life, etc.
Yeah, that is the key premise to why we've had like a 8-year relationship, and with no end in sight, because as we continue to have these fruitful conversations, they again leave us hungering for them more, and we keep coming back. And if both of us are in pursuit of truth in the relationship and outside of the relationship, we'll come together with new information, talk about it, bounce it off of each other, gain something from that, go away, research more information, bounce it off of other people, and then it's just this constant loop of ideally getting closer to the truth.
Yeah.
Which we've pretty much constantly pursued, at least in the last 6 years, probably more so the last 3, but at least in the last 6 years, we've definitely had that as one of the largest points of our friendship, one of the biggest pieces of it.
Yeah, more so in the last 3, I'd say.
Yeah, definitely more
Because the last 6 years,
seriously.
like the evolution of our friendship, what I think it just started on having a serious conversation. Like
Yeah.
it started with having a serious conversation,
Mm-hmm.
and then the serious conversations became more serious.
Yeah.
Like
More intellectual,
yeah,
more
more intellectual, more important. Like the most significant thing that you can have a conversation about is our relationship with Christ.
of course. Yeah.
But it just, I mean, yeah, it was sad to see like how many friends can't even do a serious conversation on petty things like
Mm-hmm.
how they're dealing with their parents at home.
Yeah.
But yeah, we I think that is what sparked our friendship.
For sure.
The ability
Yeah.
to have a conversation.
Yeah. That's definitely what sparked the meaningful one.
Yeah.
The one that Christ I would
The one that
Christ
kept
would
us, like
consider.
you were talking about, the one that kept us wanting more,
Yeah.
wanting to come back.
Right.
I mean, we would talk about like crushes, and even those topics would run dry, and we wish that
Of
they
course.
hadn't.
Yeah.
Because that's just how it works.
Yeah. If it's not God, it's gonna run dry.
Yeah, I mean, relationship. I mean, that's intimacy. When you
Mhm.
get to know someone on a deeper level, having these deeper conversations, and that's something that we desire, we crave for that kind of relationship. A mentor of mine always says the only thing that you're gonna take to heaven is relationship,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not a relationship where you don't. I mean, not a superficial one. You're not gonna take superficial relationships to heaven.
Right. Yes, something like I believe I hate to misquote this, so take this with a grain of salt. But it was something like 80%. Psychologists found that 80% of people's problems were solved just by talking it out with somebody. So not by getting advice from an approved psychologist, from a professional, but instead just being a wall that can show that you're listening, that they can talk to. That would solve 80% of their problems. And we're talking like real problems. We're not talking like I'm sad, like genuine, like real problems that a lot of people had. 80% of them were solved that way. So don't undervalue that importance of a friendship that you can just go to no matter what. And something I do want to end off on is the last verse that also focuses on friendship. Everyone's heard it. It's stereotypical, but I want to leave you with it. Proverbs 27:17. Mm-hmm. Iron sharpens iron, and one man sharpens another. If you're friends, and I want to make clear about this verse, one man isn't gender specific. It's just
most people.
There's language reasons why it's man. Anyway,
yeah.
If your friend isn't strengthening you, then you have to ask 2 questions, right? What is the friendship, and what do you want to get out of it? Because sometimes you have friends that you don't necessarily need to. They can just be surface level friendships. They can be superficial. I wouldn't consider them friendships at that point. I would just consider them acquaintances. But that's whatever definition. So figure out what you want out of the friendship, and then move from that. So if you realize like, oh man, I want this friendship to be more, go to the person and talk about it. But sitting silently will never change anything.
Yeah.
Right? How can you expect change when you don't change anything in your life?
One thing I will say in opposition to that, not in opposition, but kind of an adding point,
mm-hmm.
is you might not, iron sharpens iron, but one piece of iron, like for example, if you made something out of iron and you're trying to sharpen it,
mm-hmm.
one is to sharpen the other. You're not trying to sharpen the other. Like,
yeah,
one piece of iron is sharpening the other. So not every friendship is going to have mutual growth at the beginning.
Of course.
Sometimes you have to cultivate that friendship by just being the giver and not the receiver.
Yeah, I mean, there's mentorship as well, right? You have to,
exactly.
But you have to understand where that is. Like, you have to understand that, like, oh, this is a mentorship. This is not. And I think that a lot of people, when you're the giver, you know what your role is.
Yeah, and but so there's been circumstances. One of my friends, actually, for the longest time, I did feel like I wasn't gaining anything out of the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of it was tough.
Mm-hmm.
But I see him as a friend now that I can glean a lot from.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it took a lot of patience, and I didn't even know I was doing it. I'm a pretty loyal friend. I don't really cut people out of my life. even if it's not like the best friendship.
Mm-hmm.
But over time, like it eventually became a great friendship, because I think, I honestly, in my opinion, I think that our friendship sharpened him a lot, and it didn't like make me dull, right? But I think it sharpened him a lot, and now he's someone that I learn a lot from.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I don't. It doesn't have to be mutually beneficial.
No, right.
All the time.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, the rule that 50-50 rule is a rule that should be looked at on a wide
Ultimately,
scale.
50-50. Yeah. It's going to be 70-30 sometimes.
Right.
It's going to be 60-40 sometimes. But overall, you both want to get something out of it. Get an even amount.
Yeah. So, yeah, just, be aware. And then be honest with your friends. Just try. If you want to harbor a friendship that is valuable, that lasts a long time, those 4 things are going to be the biggest points of contention in my opinion. Pride, love, commonality, and truth. Those are going to be the biggest things you'll have to work together to get through. And I think that applies to, I think it's pretty universal.
Yeah.
I think so.
I think that more, I would say more so for men.
Yeah, I would agree. This is,
like specifically the pride. I feel like women don't struggle with that as much.
Yeah.
It's definitely a problem, 100%.
And I think it's different type.
It's a different kind of pride, yeah, 100%. It's honestly, it's the same. It just might not be applied the same.
Right. But if you can figure out how to work through those 3 things, you can be friends with somebody forever. If you're both committed to navigating those 4 things, in my opinion.
Yeah.
There's no limits to the friendship. So, yeah, I hope that helped some people out there. It certainly is good for us to talk about these things, and helpful for us to navigate as we are business partners, because all of these are elevated. All of the tension and stress is elevated.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a reason people say don't start a business with your friend.
Yeah, it makes things difficult, but then again,
a lot of it just comes down to, are you willing to humble yourself?
Yeah, and it's really easy to get ego when you become a businessman, or when you try to pursue these things. It's wrestling with ego can be difficult. But in short, let us know if there's any other topics you guys want us to talk about, of course. And then, use the comment section. Let us know what, do you disagree with these? Is there anything you would add? Is there anything you would take away? That's always open, and it's a really great place for us to gain some understanding, because we're not all knowing. We're just navigating, and this has been our experience as we've navigated through our friendship. So continue to tell us and let us know what you guys think.
Yeah. All around,
Yeah, definitely. In any sense, not just necessarily of the 4 topics or whatever. But yeah, let us know, and stay tuned, because these are coming out a little bit more often than we had originally expected, which we're super happy to do. But ideally, we're going to touch on topics that may not have anything to do with the business, like this one. So stay tuned if you're interested. We appreciate you guys listening, whether you're watching the video or listening. And stay tuned for any new ones coming out.